Hello, my name is Katrina MacDonald, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Susie Placencia. Susie and I are excited to be working with Sepsis Alliance to help create a national sepsis data trust. A data trust is a hub of privacy-protected information about a disease or a condition that can help experts better understand that condition. For example, the National Program of Cancer Registries, which was created in 1992, has helped us to learn about cancer and continue to improve cancer treatments. But there's currently no hub for sepsis information at the national level, so there's a lot that we still don't understand about this condition. And the less we know, the less we are able to fight sepsis and save lives. That's why Sepsis Alliance is working to create a national sepsis data trust. And Congress has just begun a process that would allow us to start this important work. It's called the Appropriations process. And that is how Congress determines what projects, agencies, and initiatives are going to receive funding for the entire fiscal year and how much each of those projects will get. This year, Sepsis Alliance is asking Congress for $5 million to begin the work of creating a national sepsis data trust. So where do you, as a sepsis advocate, come in? Constituents like you are an extremely important part of this process. Members of Congress take constituent requests into consideration when they're making decisions about how to spend the budget. They want to hear from you about the ways you think federal money ought to be spent. So the members of Congress have forms that you as a constituent can fill out and make the case for the funding that you think is important. We're so grateful to you for all of your advocacy around sepsis and grateful to you for taking a couple of minutes to learn more about how you can weigh in this appropriations process. Susie and I are going to walk you through how to submit 3 appropriations request forms, one for each of your United States senators and one for your member of the House of Representatives. Each form will take less than 15 minutes to fill out, but it will really help us make an impression on Congress. The more they hear from advocates like you across the country, the more likely they will be to act on this life-saving funding request. So, Susie, sometimes it's really hard to know, especially with recent redistricting, who your member of Congress even is. Help.
Thanks, Katrina. Yeah, that's a great question. And the House of Representatives knows it's hard to keep track of who your member of Congress is sometimes. So luckily on their website, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. They've made a really helpful tool to easily figure that out. So if you go to the House of Representatives website, which is just house.gov, in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, you will find a zip code search lookup bar. I'm going to go ahead, since I live in Washington, D.C. right now, put in my childhood zip code so we can find who my member of Congress would have been if I still lived there. Oh, it would help if I typed in my zip code right. So that's the first important step. So when you put in the zip code and you hit look up, what you will see is hopefully you're lucky and you have a zip code that just has one representative representing it. But if you live in a more populated urban area, oftentimes what happens is you're going to see 2, sometimes 3, even 4 members of Congress's name pop up. And so you say, well, I can't have 4 representatives, so who is it? And luckily, if you just put in the rest of your mailing address or your street address right here, click I'm not a robot, find your representative, it will pare down further who your actual member of Congress is. I know sometimes people get concerned about privacy, and don't worry about that. They're not collecting this information. It's just to help you find your member of Congress. And then on this, once your member of Congress's name has popped up, it's really easy to find their website from there. They've hyperlinked their name. So if you click on it, you can see right here, it'll take you right to the member of Congress's website. Pat, I know the Senate and the House are always a little bit different from one another. So do you want to share how to find your senator?
Sure. And, people are more likely to know who their two senators are than who their representative is. But it's still helpful to have this lookup tool because you want to be able to get to the website for your United States senator in order to find the appropriations request form. So I'm going to share my screen. And when you are looking for your United States senators, you can go to the website at www.senate.gov. And again, because the Senate and the House like to do things slightly differently, the Find Your Senators button is going to be on the top left of the Senate website. There's a drop-down menu by state. I'm going to go down to Virginia, which is the state that I live in, and clicking on that will take me to my two United States senators, Senator Warner and Senator Kaine. Again, there's a hyperlink so that I can go to the senator's website, and in most cases, we'll be able to find the appropriations request form there. So Susie, now I'm at the website. How do I find the form and what do I do with it once I found it?
That's a great question, Kat. So like we mentioned, most of the forms or members of Congress have forms on their website. I will give the caveat that not all of them do. And if you wind up having a senator or representative who does not have their forms on display on the website, it's really easy to just go ahead and call the office and ask them, and they should provide you with that information. But we are going to show examples that are a little easier just with folks who have it on the website. So the home pages for members of Congress all look a little bit different, but almost all of them have this search magnifying glass icon in the top right corner. So you can go ahead and click on that and type in the words appropriations and form. And most of the time that will lead you to the form. You'll want to make sure that we are filling out requests for fiscal year 2024. Some offices have forms from past years that they've left up, so don't accidentally fill out one from a previous fiscal year. We're using Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz form just to use as an example. And so this is, I've already searched it. We found it on her website. And the first thing to note is most of the time they're going to ask you, are you trying to fill out a programmatic request or a language report request? And we are doing a programmatic request. So you click on this button, and she has a little bit more of an old school style, even though it's still online. You click programmatic request, and if you'll see down here at the bottom of my screen, it opened a downloadable Word document that we can fill out, which we have one filled out already to show you an example. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and pull that up.
So while you're doing that, one of the questions that we are frequently asked is, when are these forms due? When do they need to be completed by and submitted? Unfortunately, this year, things are a little less organized than usual, and we don't have a simple answer to that question. Just as members of Congress have developed their own slightly different but relatively consistent forms, they have also established their own due dates for constituents to submit requests in order to be considered. Most of those due dates have been established in mid-March, although some offices have due dates as late as the end of March, and some that have mid-March deadlines may extend them. The bottom line is, we want to make sure that we get these in as quickly as possible. The longer the office has to consider the request, the more likely it is to end up in the member of Congress's own request to the Appropriations Committee. So thank you for your help in getting these completed as quickly as possible and in for consideration.
Thank you, Katrina. So you can see here on your screen, or I hope you can see here on your screen, a form for Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz that we've already gone ahead and filled out. Like we've already mentioned, no two offices' forms will be exactly alike, but don't worry, the information that they're asking for is generally going to be pretty much the same, if not the exact same, in just some different orders. So most of the forms start pretty basic, asking for contact information and organization information. You can feel free, depending on the form, to leave some of this information blank if you don't feel like sharing an organization. You are not an organization, you're an individual constituent, and your voice should matter regardless. If you do feel like going ahead and putting in an organization, you could fill out information for Sepsis Alliance, for example, or if there's another entity that you work with, that would make sense as well. Then you'll go ahead and put in your contact information. Chances are you probably won't be contacted by the congressional office, but sometimes they have some clarifying questions that they need to ask. So it's important that you give them a phone number and email address that you are regularly monitoring. Scroll down here a little bit. Once we get through the contact information portion of the forms, that's where we get into the real meat of what they're looking for. So like we already mentioned, this is a programmatic request. A lot of these forms, once you've clicked programmatic, it will already automatically fill it out for you, but just make sure that it says that in this line, or if it hasn't been filled out, you write that in. They'll often ask for the title of the request you're looking for, which in our case is a National Sepsis Data Trust. And then a lot of the offices will ask for a real short 1 to 2 sentence description for what the funding you are asking for would do. And just make sure when you see parameters that they're putting on the form. So for example, 1 sentence, make sure it just stays 1 sentence and it doesn't seep into 2 or 3. Sometimes you'll see instances where they have word limit counts of 250 or less, for example, and just make sure that you're staying within those parameters. Congressional offices often get so many appropriations requests and the staff have a lot to sift through, as does the member, that sometimes they use folks who don't follow instructions as a way to kind of weed out some requests. So we don't want to get our request not considered because we didn't dot our I's and cross our T's. Then they'll often ask what subcommittee this request is in. And in our instance, it's the Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education subcommittee. They'll ask for the agency, what account. And then I want to highlight down here, they'll often ask for funding information, not only for the request that you're requesting for this current fiscal year or upcoming fiscal year, which for us is fiscal year 2024, but they'll also ask for some past history so they can get a sense of what historically has happened with this account. You all are, I guess, getting off a little bit easy because we're asking for a brand new item of funding. And so there is no past history for us to go off of. In those instances, it's perfectly okay just to fill out NA. We don't want to leave these sections blank like we may be able to do in some of the other, like contact information sections, because if we just leave it blank, the congressional office might think that we didn't do our due diligence and look into past bills for what the funding level was. So we want to make sure it's clear that this has not been a funding item before. The other section I want to point out is they will often ask what amount was included for this program in the president's budget. Well, we're recording this webinar at the end of February, and we don't have a budget from the president yet, but we're pretty sure that this will not be included in his budget. So you can go ahead and just put NA if you fill this out before, mid-March, but we will update you all if something exciting happens and the president did happen to include it. But like I said, we don't expect that to happen. The next section that is typical to happen is you gave that brief sentence at the beginning, but they're going to ask you and give you time to give a little bit more of a short answer response to what the purpose and impact of this programmatic request is. And they're also going to often ask you to describe how this has impact on the state or districts or the member of Congress that you're representing. You all live in the districts and the states that you'd be filling out forms for, so you can, of course, feel comfortable to talk about what's happening in your own landscape. This is also a good instance if you have personal stories that you feel comfortable sharing to include as well. As always with advocacy, numbers and data help, but it's those personal connections and stories that really help people understand an issue. And then scrolling down here to the bottom, they'll often ask you, lots of people submit multiple appropriation requests to an office, and so they'll ask you to give a priority ranking. We hope that if you are submitting more than one appropriation request to a congressional office, you'll consider putting the Sepsis Alliance request at number 1. And if you are just submitting one request, even though it says if submitting, go ahead and put a number 1 in for the form as well. And then the last question on the form, and a lot of member offices will ask, is list all the members of the House and Senate who are receiving this request. That's a little bit of a tough question for us to answer, especially because we hope many of you are filling out these forms and we're not always going to be able to communicate with each other timely as this is happening. Feel free to leave that section blank, or if you have a friend that you know is requesting and putting this in, you could go ahead and list it. But if you don't have that information, that is okay. This form that we've filled out, we will share with you as well. So don't feel like you needed to, capture all this information. We'll send it to you, and then you'll be able to use that to fill out your own form. And like Katrina mentioned earlier, it takes 15 minutes or less to do, and we hope it could even take 5 minutes or less since we've filled out a lot of the information for you already. So that's one type of form where you download it to the Word document. A lot of offices on the Senate side in particular are now starting to do forms over on their website where you fill out like a SurveyMonkey template and click through. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. We filled out a form like this for Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. One thing to note that is again happening more recently in the last year or so is some senators in particular, rather than just being able to go to the website and click on the link, they're asking you to create a login account. I think that's for privacy reasons for yourself, and they don't want your information taken, but it's really simple. You just need to put in your email address, make a password, and then that way you have your form information saved and you continue to work on it whenever you feel like you have time. So this is an example of an online template. Like we said, the information is often very much the same, if not always in the exact order that you've seen on some of the other forms. So they're asking for contact information. You'll see lots of offices ask for secondary contact information, if applicable. And if you like to fill that out, you can go ahead and put Katrina McDonald's name in, as well as her email address, which we'll provide at the end. So if they have any technical questions, they have a second point of contact they can reach out to. So we'll scroll down. And then now we're on the third page of the form, technically on question 17, and this is where the real substantive questions begin again, just like we went over on the last form. So we'll scroll down. Note that on some of these website forms, rather than the Word document, it's nice because there's checkbox, you don't have to type as much in. And then just as a reminder, on the Senate side in particular, they will really want to understand the impact of a program on your state that you're in. You guys are advocates who live in your state, you understand the importance of it, but just make sure to frame what your argument is in the context of the state and use the more general box to frame the national conversation. Some questions you don't need to fill out, like we've mentioned. So for example, this question, if applicable, is your project engineering and permitting ready? We're not building a building, we're not building a bridge, so you don't need to fill that out, you can leave it blank. And then again, the question of if you're submitting more than one request, rank your request, and we would hope that you'd put it at number 1. And then here we are back to the funding level questions. One thing to note, and you may have noticed on the form we did earlier, when we were requesting 5 million, we put the number 5 and then we wrote out million, which is how some offices will talk about funding levels. Over here, it's always important to read the fine print. They're asking for the total amount numerical only. So we went ahead and wrote 5 million out all the way. So once you've done that, you go ahead and hit submit, and then your request has been considered by the office.
Susie, just as a quick review, sometimes you can go to the member's website and find the form relatively easily, especially by doing the search FY24 appropriations forms. What if I can't find the form on the website? Or what if they don't put it on the website? What do I do then?
Great question. Always go ahead and give the office a call. And we recommend that you call the Washington, D.C. office. Members of Congress have their district offices, and they handle a little bit of different substance than the D.C. office does. So call Washington, D.C., tell them you'd like to fill out an FY24 appropriations request. And the nice young woman or gentleman answering the phone should help you find it quickly. And like we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, some members just don't put it on the website. They like to have folks go through that little extra step to call and get it. And you can easily get it that way and just follow whatever instructions and deadlines they give you.
So we want to have as many folks as are willing to go through this process submit your request, partly to help educate your congressional office about sepsis, and partly to build support for this important federal funding. If you have any questions, if you really can't find the form, if the office is not helpful, if there's a question on a form that you're not exactly sure how to answer, please reach out to me, to Susie, or to Amanda Feynman at Sepsis Alliance. All of our information is provided with this webinar, as well as copies of the completed request forms so that you have that information in writing. We want to help you in every way that we can to make this as easy and straightforward as possible. Thank you again for all that you do to advocate to end sepsis. We're grateful to be in this fight with you.